Really enjoyed your lecture yesterday and just have a few follow-up questions from that. So now, as a landscape architect in the Netherlands, I'm wondering if you can describe a little bit about what landscape architecture looks like in the Netherlands.
Okay, I studied, as you know, landscape architecture at Wageningen University, which is an agricultural university. It was the first university in the Netherlands for having landscape architecture. So I did the way by becoming an agronomic engineer with a specialty in landscape architecture. But nowadays it's possible in the Netherlands to become a landscape architect by doing Academy of Arts in Amsterdam, or by studying it by architecture, the building science. So you have three ways of becoming a landscape architect. That's by building science, by arts, and by living science, life science. So before everybody studied it by life science. The typical thing about architecture, landscape architecture in the Netherlands is, I think, that we have this engineering way of looking at things that has to do with the tradition in the Netherlands of polder making and of building the land and the landscape. So I think that's a short description of the situation of the landscape architecture in the Netherlands.
Okay.
And so I started my work for the State Forestry Service. I work now with the Ministry of Economics. And how do you say it? Yes, apart from that, I'm lecturing at the Academy of Arts in Amsterdam.
Okay, great. So with these many different roles,
yes.
You've been a part of the development of this project Lanksmeer. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about the origins of Lanksmeer and what your role was in the development.
Okay. Lanksmeer originated in the 90s. In the 90s, when this sustainability idea surged all over the world because of the conference of Rio, the environmental conference of Rio. And there was a woman, Marleen Kaptein. She was a head designer for theater and so on. But on the other hand, she had several jobs in all kinds of building institutes and investigation institutes for building. So working in this institute, she met a lot of people that also were interested in the relation between social housing, social developments, and also sustainability. So she got, when the Rio conference, she got this inspiration and had a dream about really showing that sustainable living is possible, and maybe that she should develop together with other people a sustainable neighborhood or a sustainable city. Because in those days sustainability was linked to photovoltaics, to several kinds of techniques, and building it in one house or one building, but never using it on a scale of a neighborhood or a city. So her idea was, let's show that it's possible on that scale, that it's useful, and also that it gives good living environments and a joyful way of living for the people. With that idea, she started searching through the Netherlands for other people interested. And in the meantime, because this was the time of sustainability searching, I was working for the Ministry of Agriculture, where I developed together with others a concept, innovative concept for city landscapes. And in the city landscapes, you had several ideas, several guidelines. For instance, urban agriculture, designing with flows, so looking at the metabolism of the cities and of the landscape, designing all kind of infrastructure landscapes, and building green infrastructures. And all those ideas also inspired Marleen and the people that were working on the project to finally start with the project. So I was not involved really in the developing and the starting point, but I came later on. So what Marleen and her group did, a group of experts from the University of Delft and other universities in the Netherlands was starting with preparing guidelines that fitted into this concept of sustainable living. With this concept, they searched through the Netherlands for maybe possible locations and possible city councils that could have interest in adopting this idea. And so finally they came into Culemborg. Culemborg had a city council, a governance by, in those days, the Labour Party. And they also were interested in having a kind of sustainable development, urbanistic development in their town. So that was a happy coincidence where politics and people of the profession and people out of the society came together to really develop this project. So they started with a project group with both the city council and on the other hand those people interested. That was more the initiative, but then they went searching for inhabitants, future inhabitants, which also should form from the beginning, or more or less from the first of the beginning, involvement in the project. Because one of the big ideas was to have a kind of self-organization and involvement from the future inhabitants.
Wow.
Should I elaborate more on that? Or?
Well, perhaps we will come back to some of those.
Oh no, you asked for my role, so
yeah.
Finally my role was, when the project already was developing, we were searching with our family a new home, and we were searching for something special, but in that search I knew already about, as a professional, I knew about this development becoming to start, and I thought, no, that's not my thing. It's too much my way, my ideals, my way of thinking. So instead of directly saying, okay, I want to be part of it, I had a bit of resistance. But when then finally with our family we visited the first part of the project already developed, all the family fell in love with the realization. So then I had to follow the wishes of my family. And we entered, and it appeared that it's really a nice project and a nice neighborhood to live. And it's a good thing to live in a neighborhood where you can share many of your ideals with other people, and so it isn't that closed as I was afraid of. It is open to society and to all other things you want to do in a normal city, but on the other end you can share lots of your ideals with other people, other professionals that are living there. So then we came in, and I'm being a landscape architect, my special interest was living there to mean something for the green development of the neighborhood. So directly I became involved in the foundation. That's part of all the process, Foundation Terra Bella. And what we do, what they do is organizing the maintenance of the green infrastructure of the neighborhood, because that has also a typical kind of way of working, which is that the responsibility for the green maintenance is with the residents. And so the residents are organized by this foundation. The foundation also is the contact with the city council and with the water winning corporation that's part of the project. And so we organized the working days, we made the green maintenance plan during the years, we do the contacts with the city council. Special is also that the money that's normally invested by the city in a kind of neighborhood of this, how do you call it, this amount of people and amount of houses, this money goes directly to the neighborhood according to the green maintenance plan. So we get the same money as other neighborhoods in the town, but we can decide how to use the money. Partly the money goes back to civil servants that do the green maintenance. Partly we give it in a contract to a gardener, especially a gardener for the neighborhood. And the other money we can save because we do the work ourselves. So when we do work, we save money, and the money we can invest again in the neighborhood, in the quality of the green, in all kinds of things related to the green infrastructure.
Wow.
So there are several kinds of people working in the neighborhood. That's the residents themselves overall, civil servants, and this gardener. And the gardener also works with disabled people or people with special needs. So that's another social element in the whole project. So my role overall was organizing the green infrastructure and the maintenance of it.
That's great. So there's like a very complex, layered governance structure within
Yes.
this community. Very interesting. You mentioned that Longsmeer came out of kind of this desire to transition scales of thinking from traditional sustainable strategies,
Yes.
like a scaling up of that. And I'm curious if you see Longsmeer as a model for urbanization at even a larger scale.
That's a complex question, but I try to answer. First, the scale that it has, it's about 30 hectares. We are about 400 units, 400 dwellings. So that means in the Dutch situation, 1,000 people. So it's not that big, but it's a neighborhood. So, and the neighborhood is fitted into an infrastructure. We have public transport, the railway station. We have a provincial road. We have, of course, biking roads, all these kinds of, like this structure. This element, this neighborhood is hanged up into this structure and fit into the structure of all the town. So I think this kind of neighborhoods you could copy and paste also to other situations where you have the same kind of ready-made infrastructure, water structure, etc. available. Difficulty could be that we also have a typical way of governance now. So to make a city that functions like that, maybe it's possible, but it's a totally different way of organizing politics and organizing the world now. So we have this formal governance structure in the Netherlands with national government, provincial government, cities. And this is another informal way of organizing it bottom up. It could function, but I think when you want to organize on a national scale and do it like that, it can become difficult because you need a lot of communication. We have lots of workshops, we have a lot of people working in workshops together. And on a scale of 1,000 people or several times 1,000 people, okay, that's possible to have this communication and to have this participation. But when you scale it up, it becomes a different question. So you should invent different ways of having democracy and organizing all kind of stuff. But as a building block for other city developments, yes, I could think that it could help. And on the other hand, it's not just this all over concept, but also the things we learned about using sectoral infrastructures. So not this integrated concept, but elements of it like energy, like water, like slow traffic, etc. You could transport to other situations and learn about it. For instance, we have a energy company which is owned by ourselves. So the people in the neighborhood own the energy company on the scale of the neighborhood. But what is happening already is that our company is trying to organize a company on a regional level, on the level of the province or a part of the province. So with the energy we have, I mean the personal energy and the ideas in the group, the board of the company, we are trying to scale it up to a regional scale. And also you see that this idea of energy corporations done by the public, bottom up, is growing and popping up all over the country. So we have the big multinationals that offer energy. Before we had the energy companies of the state, that has disappeared. But with all the ideas about sustainability, in the Netherlands more and more people want to organize themselves, and on a regional scale they are trying to make companies.
Wow, that's incredible. Within the community itself, did you, or I mean in its design or conception, is there room for adaptation that was built into the original design? Or like how did you leave room for the unplanned?
Yeah, all the process was that we started with charrettes, with workshops to think about with the group of the initiative group and the group of maybe future inhabitants in master classes to develop an urban plan. So there was made an urban plan which was rather it was a plan with urbanistic forms, etc., but it was meant to make a zoning plan. So with this plan being ratified by everybody who had worked together in these charrettes, we made an official zoning plan, but the zoning plan was very flexible and very open, which in those times was also an innovation, to make zoning plans that didn't describe very strictly what could happen. It didn't describe the heights, it didn't describe the volumes, etc., which is normally in the Netherlands. It was very global, but it had as a kind of explanatory part, a part that talked a lot about the targets, the objectives, about sustainability, and about the visual objectives and about the green objectives. So the objectives were clear, but the criteria in the zoning plan were very open. That made that in the process, which was a rather long process compared to other big neighborhoods, because normally a developer comes and says, okay, I built 10,000 houses, more or less the same. It's a strict zoning plan and direct translated into an urban plan, and it stays like that. In our case, we wanted to have many experiments. So these experiments were possible in the open zoning plan. But then what happened was, because it was a process of already 15 years, when I'm living there, when others are living there, you have your house completed, you hope that in front of your house and in the neighborhood this openness is not too much, because you don't want to be confronted with a high rising block or other things.
All the unexpected.
Yeah, not too unexpected. So then together with the city council we decided to make more strict the zoning plan, and thus also restricting a bit the flexibility and the adaptability of the plan. Another thing is that in the gardens, step by step, the details, etc., were made, and also in this flexible open plan there was many flexibility to realize different options. And then I can call, for example, one thing I can recall which was typical. We planned to have not many cars in the neighborhood, because the parking lots were outside at the outskirts of the neighborhood, and the idea was to walk in, to bike in, and to have lots of public space because there weren't any cars crossing. That was the idea, but what happened is that with the cars, okay, it could stay like that. But with the development, for instance, of internet shopping, you see that suddenly there is a need that little vans come and go and deliver their products. So and then it's a difficult idea to say leave the product outside the neighborhood or at the border of the neighborhood and I come and catch it. You could say it, but the companies that come delivering, they don't accept it. So what you now see is that time and time there are more and more little vehicles coming into the neighborhood, which is not totally according to the idea. But still, in general, the idea functions. But so you can see how some developments, societal or technological, sometimes can not fit into a certain kind of urban plan, which happens also to other plans.
Yeah, yeah. You discussed yesterday that you have this gradient of property types from like public to private and some shared. How does that translate into the ideas of citizenship within this community? Or like what role does that play in shaping the values of the community?
Okay. It had a central role because involvement of the people was one of the central ideas of the concept of Almere, of Langsmeer. And so apart from stating that this was important, that they were involved in the planning process, also by having these differentiated property forms, you could make that people state and are involved. We have this sequence of private property, your house with a private little garden. Then you have the semi-public, which are shared grounds. They officially are shared property. It's called mancommunity or mandeligheid in Dutch, which is a sort of shared property right of grounds, which you can find in your act of buying, in your act of financing. And then you had the public area, and in the public area you have this difference between public of the city council or private public of the water winning company or of the city farm, which is also in the concept. But important is that you share ground, so that means that people are invited, or you could say convicted, to discuss with each other what to do with this ground, because when you share this property, you have to decide together, and so that's one of the starting points of organizing the social cohesion in the same neighborhood. And then with the public area, you meet with this idea of involvement in the green maintenance. So the public area is property of the city council, but we as involved citizens want to develop it, want to maintain it. So when you look at the structure, you maintain your own private garden, if you want, but in general people want to have a neat garden, so they... And then you have in every little part of the neighborhood different ways of organizing the maintenance of the semi-public, of the shared grounds. So that means that you have to communicate, that there are working days, that there are decision days, that you have to invest together. So that's very good for the quality of the space, but also for the social cohesion between the citizens. And then the Terra Bella Foundation organizes working days and discussions about what to do with the public area. So yes, property is very important.
Is in those shared spaces, is there ever conflict or disagreement in how that space is used, and how do you, or how is that resolved, and how does that resolution of that conflict contribute to the social cohesion?
In general, it functions quite good.
Okay.
Especially because many people were involved in all the development of the project. So you can see that there are already people that are open in discussing about property together, and they have learned a lot in the process before. Also, I noticed that when you are with many people, many I mean 25 families or an amount of that, it's easier to come to an agreement than when you have only 2 or 3 people.
Wow.
Because there are checks and balances, and so yes, it functions. Only there were some occasions where it's where there were things from outside complicating the shared ground. For instance, in some spot there were needs from the city council, and functions were combined with these shared grounds. For instance, there should be a road. So you can imagine that when there is a road, you have little space to decide on your own area what to do. And then you have many people, very little space to discuss, and then the pressure becomes high. So and the strange thing is that you could lay a bit of guilt with the city council instead with the people and the way of how they communicate with each other.
Okay.
In general, shared grounds and green maintenance are a very good way to have a smooth social cohesion. Another thing what was more conflictive was the use of a car and the entrance of cars inside the project. So most of the people knew on beforehand that you have to put your car outside, and so we all were for sustainability, so for few or lower use of cars. Some people didn't share this idea, and in some cases there were elaborated parking lots near the houses, and that means that there then is traffic inside the neighborhood, which is a kind of conflict with the idea of the neighborhood. So it appeared that that's the car use, car property, and how it comes into the neighborhood is a very heavy thing. So there were heavy conflicts about that, and again, part of it originates in how grounds are sold by the city council to the residents, because when you buy the ground you gain some rights, and so city council gave people some rights that weren't totally according to the principles. So, but by giving and taking, finally it resolved, and that happens many times in the neighborhood. You see that people are dependent of each other, and that everybody has to give something and sometimes wants to take something. So in general it functions very good.
All right, well, thank you so much for sharing a bit more about this community, and I appreciate your time.